You already know what it is. It's your host, Mikey.
And Leeroy Jenkins.
You nailed it.
I'm sorry. I couldn't help it.
I didn't know if you would nail it quite as well as you just did, but that was pretty good.
Was that like first take, best take?
I think so, yeah.
Ooh, all right. Well, why don't we...
At least I got chicken.
Why don't we jump right into it? So today...
Yeah, speaking of chicken, actually.
Yeah. So today we are going to go over not just a basic overview of diet and nutrition, but diet and nutrition within the context of supporting your goals in terms of fitness, but also getting into a little bit of the health side of it too, because that's a rabbit hole we could go extremely far down, but we'll cover some of it, but you'll be 99% of the way there after this. So yeah, I think that's where we'll try not to be too controversial. I'm only going to talk about carbs a lot.
It's crazy that carbs are controversial.
Yeah, but so let's get into this. So when you say diet and nutrition in the context of fitness, so what is the first thing we kind of have to look at? I guess there's a few ways, but it's all going to come back to one thing. We could be like, okay, let's talk about the foods you're going to eat, but we'll get into that. Realistically, when it comes to what aspects of diet and nutrition are going to drive the progress you're after, the first thing we've got to look at are your energy balance, aka calories, your caloric intake, and what constitutes that caloric intake. So with that, really step one is going to be like just establishing how much you need to eat and understanding how that plays into your outcomes. So depending on whether your goal is muscle growth or fat loss, my biggest mistake when I got into this is thinking, hey, I'm working out now. I can eat whatever I want. It doesn't matter. I'm going to grow big. I'm going to get a six pack, all that, because I'm working out. I don't know if you have kind of a similar story, but I do.
Not really. I always underate. That was my problem.
I wish I had that issue.
Yeah, if I'm left to my own devices, I typically lean out, which is not good. I don't like that. I don't mean lean out in like a good way either. It's like, because it's kind of like all over the place. Well, that's actually not true. Okay, as I've gotten older, it's actually like I get that like kind of skinny fat thing happening, but I never have like a problem where suddenly I'm just like bulked like in a permanent bulk state.
I envy you. I'm the opposite. Left to my own devices, if I'm not being diligent, I will start getting husky. But that's because your net energy balance, which is your net energy intake, your calories for the day. So for all intents and purposes, you will have an amount of calories that you burn a day. That's called your total daily energy expenditure. And if you've been reading me or Mikey for a while, you have an idea. But basically, just to give a brief summary of this, that's going to be a combination of your base metabolic rate, which is basically the amount of calories you'll burn existing. It's determined off of your age, gender, weight, height, all of that. So that's just like, even if you were in a coma, you will have a base metabolic rate. Then it's going to be your non-exercise energy thermogenesis, which is basically life. Walking around, going, from your desk to the bathroom, just day-to-day life, the activity you do for life, tapping your foot, stuff like that. Then you're going to have your exercise activity thermogenesis, which is calories burned during exercise. And then there's also something called the thermic effect of food. So depending on what you're eating, you will use a different amount of energy to digest it. Protein is the highest at 20 to 30% of the calories consumed being burnt. Carbs and fat are each right around 5%. So yeah, protein's pretty awesome. But that's all of that combined will be your total daily energy expenditure. In general, with some nuance we'll get into, if you are looking to build muscle, which is gaining weight, you're gaining lean muscle mass, you're going to need an energy surplus. You're going to need to eat more than you burn because it's an expensive process. Building muscle and adding tissue, you need the extra calories. I mean, if you logically think through it, it makes sense. It's like, oh, if I want my body to change and gain weight, I need to have more energy. And that works like, I would hope no one really wants to do this unless you're unhealthy, like very underweight. But like, if you went out with the goal to gain fat, yeah, you would need to eat more. Fat's weight, it's tissue, muscle, tissue. Extra calories need to support that. Then if you want to lose fat, if you really break down fat and what's the biological role in fat, it's stored energy. So if we want to burn fat, if we're eating more calories than we need, or we're eating the exact calories we need, that balance, that maintenance, why would you use stored energy? You won't. You don't need to. So you need to be in a caloric deficit, a negative net energy balance, if you want to lose weight. Now, there's nuance there. If you're a brand new person in the gym and all that, you can actually get away with eating maintenance, maybe a little less, a little more. You'll burn fat and gain weight. This will go away eventually. And it's not necessarily the most efficient way. Some people need to lose weight more than they need to build muscle. So deficit's smart. Some people are naturally smaller, skinnier, so it'd be smarter to eat a little bit more. But then also if you're like obese, you can build muscle in a deficit because you do have so much excess energy, stored fat. You'll actually use that in the muscle growth process. So there's nuance to it, but in general, and you'd be right most of the time, almost all the time, surplus growth, deficit fat loss. So that's the basis. I think you would agree. Once we establish that, that's the starting point.
Yeah, this is that whole, like calories in, calories out type of thing. I know it's kind of a overview, like just a broad sort of overview of things, like how to look at it. But yeah, the net energy balance type of thing, it seems pretty straightforward.
I don't know
and
how
it makes sense, right?
I had to burp the whole time, and I didn't. I like held it. I'm so proud.
Look at how many calories do you think you burned with that burp?
At least 3.
Like, at least you think? Wow, 3 is pretty high.
5 because I fought it, but yeah. So now, yeah, once you count for your burping, your activity, and all that, now you get this number, right?
All that neat, yeah.
I actually just published something for paid subscribers. I might even drop it just for everyone. It's this diet guide, and it goes into it. There's a way you can calculate. I just suggest using an app. There's one I've been using forever. It's on damnripped.com. You can type in like damnripped TDEE calculator. You can plug in your numbers and all that. It's pretty accurate. It's an estimate at the end of the day, but it's pretty accurate. There's a method where you take your base metabolic rate times like 1.55, or if you're working out 4 to 5 days a week, or times 1.75 if you're more active, and that will give you your TDE number. And then you decide, okay, I'm going to eat more, or I'm going to eat less. And we'll get into how much more and how much less later. Oh, I can't hold it. Excuse me. Oh, there's us 3 calories again. But
6 calories now.
6 calories. But what goes into that then? Calories, and like this is where the calories in, calories out thing and all that, it does get convoluted. At the end of the day, that's the base of this. That is the law of thermodynamics. So within that, we got to start looking at what makes up a calorie. Like, you don't just eat a calorie, you're eating it through the 3 main macronutrients. It's actually 4 technically. Alcohol is one of them, but hopefully you're not drinking enough that's like, that's a daily macro. So the 3 are going to be protein, fats, and carbs. Protein, 4 calories per gram. Carbs, 4 calories per gram. Fat, 9 calories per gram. So
alcohol, 7, right?
I believe it's 7. Yep. So
with 0 nutritional,
well, yeah. Actually, theoretically, I'm pretty sure you can sustain life on beer. I'm pretty sure it has all the essential nutrients you need.
It
to
has
sustain life.
carbs, right? A
Yeah.
beer has carbs, but if you were drinking like straight up like alcohol, it's like zero nutritional value and just calories.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't see a reason outside of some extreme events where that should be something you're like, let's be sure we need our alcohol in our diet.
Yeah, unless
today.
you're Jack Sparrow, right? You know, on a stranded island, right? I think it was rum in those movies that he lived off of.
Oh yeah, or pirates and rum.
Where's the rum?
But yeah, we look at those. So 4 calories per gram protein, 4 calories per gram carb, 9 calories per gram fat. So protein, obviously I'm beating a dead horse. I'll get through this quick, but protein is going to support tissue repair, muscle growth, all that stuff. It's providing the amino acids. Are doing a lot of cool stuff too. We use those amino acids. Protein breaks down into amino acid. That's how your body uses it. So even your neurotransmitters, things like tyrosine, which is an amino acid, that's the building block for dopamine and all that. So it's not just muscle growth and everything, which is why protein is important in general. I mean, I'm assuming all of you are lifting weights, but even if you're not lifting weights, like protein's still good. Then we look at things like fat. Fats for hormones, building blocks of hormones, just hormone health in general. You're looking at vitamin and mineral absorption. It's necessary. You need to get enough fat. If you get too little fat, and a number I'll throw out is below 0.1 to 0.15 grams per body weight. If you get below that, you can start running into some serious issues. If you actually only ate protein and carbs with no fat, you'll die. It's called rabbit starvation. You'll die. Or that's just protein without anything else, but protein and carbs.
Only protein?
But protein, it would work with carbs too. Just protein and carbs, and just protein, or just carbs, you'll die. Well, you need protein too. If you just ate carbs, you'll die. So protein and fat's important, which leads us to carbs. So carbs are not essential. You do not need carbs to survive. So that's brought up as a reason a lot of like, oh, you don't need carbs. You don't need carbs, which is not, that's a half truth, because you don't need them, but can you utilize them and use them for your goals? Can they improve your health? Can they improve your muscle growth and all that? Absolutely. Data is so clear on that. It's very clear that carbohydrates are very useful for performance in the gym. And for some people, they feel better. They have more energy as opposed to going lower carb. And then for muscle growth, that's where it becomes, there's so many things about carbs.
It's the preferred energy source, right? For like, if you're doing exercise, it's the thing your body kind of goes to first, right? For energy.
Yep. And here's something I like to point out, that if you look at a muscle is around 80% water. Muscle also stores glycogen. So let's look at the word carbohydrate. What's that second part of the word? Hydrate. So now what's a muscle?
Hydrate.
Oh, it's 80% water. So you actually, through glycogen, if you're eating carbs in your diet and all that, and you're storing the glycogen in the muscle, it actually lets you hold more water in the muscle, which is going to give an appearance of more full muscle. It's going to be a better looking muscle. And let's say no carbs and all that. If you are depleted of glycogen, you can run into the issue where you are potentially increasing your risk for muscle protein breakdown, which is the opposite of muscle protein synthesis. Good, anabolic, building muscle. Muscle protein breakdown, catabolic, your muscles breaking down. So, and there's nuance to this. This isn't like, oh, you don't eat carbs, your muscles will break down. No, protein's still going to do its thing. Fat's going to help support the energy and all that. So it's not that, oh no carbs. No. So don't take this out of context. You can still build muscle and you can still do everything without carbs. But carbohydrates are muscle sparing. If we're consuming carbs, they're anabolic in their own sense because they're anti-catabolic. They prevent muscle protein breakdown, which then increases your nitrogen balance, which your nitrogen balance is a fancy way of saying the rate of muscle protein synthesis versus the rate of muscle protein breakdown. And you want that to be positive. You want more muscle protein synthesis than breakdown. So having carbs reduces the amount of protein breakdown, which then means you should have more protein synthesis at the end of the day, aka more gains. I don't really like to complicate things or really get into the weeds on this because it's not really necessary to understand these concepts, but that's more or less what's happening. So you need to set up your diet now, factoring this in. So you have your calories. Now you got to look at, okay, carbs, fats, protein. In general, my advice is always going to be a gram per pound of body weight for protein. So if you're 200 pounds, it's going to be 800 calories of protein, 200 grams of protein times 4, 800 calories. So if you're eating 2,000 calories a day, 800 of those are going to be protein. And then now you have 1,200 calories to play around with fat. So or fat and carbs. And how you want to set that up is preference. It does not matter. For all intents and purposes, it really does not matter as long as you're getting enough fat. You can do no carbs and fill in the rest of those 1,200 calories with fat. You can increase your protein a little bit too and like make it 50-50. You're getting, 1,000 calories of protein, 1,000 calories of fat, whatever, that works. But you just need to make sure you are getting enough fat, which my recommendation generally 0.25 to 0.3 grams per pound of body weight. You'll be good. That should be like a good minimum to kind of set. So let's do math. This is scary. Oh God. 2 meatheads doing math here. So that same person said 2,000 calories. A 200-pound person doing 2,000 calories. That's pretty low, but we're just going to work with this. They have a slow metabolism, okay? That's going to be 0.3 times 200, which I picked an easy number. That should be 60 grams of fat. Correct me if I'm wrong here.
I think it is, yeah.
Which would be what? I can do this.
I think
math.
60. Yeah, I think
540 calories.
Yeah.
So you have
times 9, right? 9 grams
I did
calories
that.
per gram.
Hey, I did that. It's 60
times
9, 540.
In case they forgot.
540. Now you'll take that 540 number. Again, that person's eating 2,000 calories. So now they're eating with protein and fat. They're at 1,340 calories. So they have 660 calories left over. So you could allot those all to carbs, which wouldn't be a bad idea. That would actually be for, if you really want to get into like what's going to be really good for performance in the gym and optimal and all that, as long as you can handle carbs, you're not like very insulin resistant or diabetic, you're generally healthy. You don't even have to be super healthy, but like you can handle carbs without an issue. You could then fill that up. That's going to be, I totally didn't use my calculator in my hand. It'd be 165 grams of carbs. So you'd be at 200 grams of protein, 165 grams of carbs, 60 grams of fat. It's going to be a pretty balanced diet too at the end of the day. If you think about the numbers, because it's going to be, divided by 2,000, 33% of your calories are coming from carbs. Then with your fat, you're going to come in at around 27%, 30% of your calories are coming from fat. And then protein is going to come in at 40%. Exactly. So a 40, 30, 30 split. It's not bad. That's actually pretty good. I would be very comfortable with giving that as a general advice. So not to get into exactly how you should set up your diet, because you can move your fats and carbs. You can play with those. Just make sure you get enough fat. But that's preference. You can still get progress regardless. If you want to go low carb, you want to keep the carbs high, whatever, do what works best for you that you enjoy, works with your health, because that's very important, and then roll with it. I see no reason, if you're healthy, to limit carbs unless they cause an issue, because carbs increase your blood sugar, cause an insulin spike. Insulin's highly anabolic. Its job is to shuttle those nutrients to the muscle. So it's going to shuttle anything in your bloodstream, that protein, those carbs, shuttle those to the muscle. Cool. Growth and repair. So I'm not here in this part of the podcast to tell you how to eat. but that is general breakdown. All right, I've been talking too much. You give me a break. Let me think.
Yeah, you want to play around with those numbers. I mean, between fat and carbs, I mean, everybody kind of responds differently. I remember John Meadows used to talk about this as well. Rest in peace. Yeah, like that. Some people would respond well to higher fats, and some people would respond well to higher carbs. You really got to like play around and find out like how your body better responds to things.
Yep. That's at the end of the day. That's literally like diet 101. Play with what works for you. The intangibles, though, that's really all you need to worry about is aim for a gram per pound of body weight in protein. You can say even 0.8 grams per pound of body weight works. Data supports that. If you're very obese, that's a little keynote to make. No, we got to talk how much. Protein, we've studies have shown and everything is safe. You can't really have too much protein. So if you're 600 pounds, 500 pounds, 400 pounds, that's a lot of protein and all that. It's probably not realistic. So you can kind of go with your estimated lean body mass, but that can be kind of hard to get. Something you actually, I've seen this before, but you made me realize it's a pretty good metric. Your height in centimeters as your protein goal. That's pretty good for someone that's not like, for me, it'd be a little low because I believe I'm 177 centimeters, telling on myself that I'm a 5'10" manlet here, but 177 centimeters, 177 grams of protein. That's actually pretty much, I'm 225 pounds. They would still work because that's my 180 grams of protein would be my 0.8. So even then it would work. But yeah, if you're more overweight, you could use that. It's going to work for you. The only time it's really not going to work is if you're like pretty big guy. I'm not like huge in the relative game of bodybuilding, but I'm a big guy. So it would even work for me. So it'll work for you.
Yeah, I've had that experience with people who are overweight and setting up their protein. At first, it was just like, it's kind of like impossible for them to reach those goals. And I always got that feedback from them. So we went to that centimeters and height rule and definitely worked out for them.
At the end of the day, even for them though, get what calories you need to eat. Understand that, eat below it. Just make sure you're getting enough protein and make sure you're getting enough fat.
Calorie balance is definitely the most important priority. There's those like pyramids of importance, and that calorie balance makes up a big portion of it, really.
Yep. And let me actually jump in here with some nuance. So I know people that are vehemently against counting calories. And when I talk about this calories in, calories out stuff, this can happen without you counting calories. I personally just find it a billion times easier to track it and do all that. That works for me. Logically, it just makes sense. Now, the arguments I've heard is, as people might know from episode 2 or 3, there's very big arguments about calories in, calories out. And I'm not here to get into that. At the end of the day, you do need this net caloric deficit. That is sound science. That's logic. That's common sense. You don't necessarily need to count to get there. So if you find a diet for you, and I hear this a lot from lower carb people, and then maybe some of these people need to eat lower carb too, because they do have insulin issues. They have insulin resistance. So if you cut out carbs, and now you're eating just protein and fats, and you are overweight, that likely will force you, as long as you're eating good whole foods, that likely will force you into a deficit. So you don't need to track it, but it can happen.
Yeah.
It's
harder. Well, because it's harder to do that, to find, like if you think about like what makes up most junk foods, they're carb and fat heavy. Those are what basically junk food is. Like carbs and fats.
I'm glad you added the fat heavy as well, because a lot of people say it's all carbs. I'm like, if you said that about candy, yes. If you said that about like donuts, pizza, all that, I'd be like, no, that's actually, most of it's more fat than anything.
Exactly.
Calories.
Exactly. And so if you cut that out and you're like cognizant of like keeping out the carbs, like let's say you don't want to do carbs. Most junk foods include carbs. And so just cutting that out, your job now to get nutrition and to get, to get food in you, it's just a lot harder. And you've cut out now a ton of junk food. So it kind of just makes it naturally easier for fat loss.
That is the best argument I have heard for low carb. Well, there's a lot of good arguments, and there can be health benefits for people.
That's the best practical application. Yeah.
Because I'm not pro carb. I'm not pro low carb, high carb, whatever. I'm pro like what makes you healthy, how you like to eat, what works for you. In the context of muscle growth, of course, I'm always going to throw this idea out that like, okay, carbs are not bad, that they can be very good. But in general, like I'm not emotionally attached to if you want to eat low carb. Don't make up false narratives. Don't start cherry picking data and manipulating that. Like be honest and be truthful and tell the whole truth. But I have no problem. That's really my problem with a lot of the lower carb crowd is just the cherry picking and like the half truths. But
yeah.
That's the
best. The best. I wish they would stick with that argument because it's actually a good one.
It's great because it's not that and that's the thing. It is not that the issue with junk food is the carbs because as we said, it's got fats and carbs, high calorie. Fats and carbs together, like predominantly with low protein is actually bad. That is a metabolic issue waiting to happen because when your insulin is spiked, you will not utilize fats at any great rate until your insulin comes down. So if you're constantly, which means you'll store the fat. Now, at the end of the day, what matters is did you have less calories in blah, blah, blah. But like for all intents and purposes, like that's not a good hormone or metabolic environment to be in if you're constantly just carbs and fats all day, no protein. That's where you get an issue. But no, so yeah, it's not necessarily that the junk food, it's carbs. And that's what makes the junk food bad. But if you do cut the junk food and you eat no junk food, or if you eat no carbs, it is going to eliminate most junk food. So that's a fantastic argument. That's
exactly.
It's because I'm not going to sit here and act like a donut is the same thing as a potato or the same thing as rice. Because that's where I'm like, whoa. Like, oh, you can't just say it's 100% carbs. Carbs are evil. A potato's not making anyone fat in its proper healthy form. You throw some oil on that, well, then it turns into a fat again. But put some oil on it and deep fry it and turn it into a French fry. Okay, now, but again, it's got fat too. But it's not potatoes and white rice making people fat. It's these processed carbs and fats and all of it. So it's a fantastic argument. Kind of leads me into the next thing we can talk about with this, which is like, what should you be eating? And I came to this kind of conclusion. And then I saw a video and I realized I just am like repeating Stan Efferding. Because my big thing has always been like, you can go back on Twitter and all that. It's always been this focus on animal proteins. I just tweeted this the other day, but animal proteins, especially beef is very nutrient dense. But chicken, all of that, lamb, beef, all of it. Then eggs, fantastic. Nature's multivitamin, very healthy. Salmon and other fatty fish, but salmon is one of the most nutrient dense foods, not just in when I say nutrients, I'm talking micronutrients as well, plus the omega-3s, which are all you have to do is type in health benefits of omega-3s and you'll get some answers on that. Then what am I missing here? There's some certain dairy products, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, yogurts in general.
What's your take on cottage cheese? Are you a fan?
I don't like it, but it's great. It's great for what it high protein and all that. It's great.
I tried it for a long time and I liked it with like frozen fruit in it. But then I remember people saying like you could also do like a savory version of it, and I forgot what some of the recipes were, and I could never get into it. It can just the texture, I think, is it's not my jam.
Some people have it with things that make no sense to me, but hey, you do you. So what? We got animal proteins, fish, eggs, things like yogurts, cottage cheese. Dairy for people. Some people can't obviously handle dairy. Cough, cough. Mikey.
I get lactose intolerant. Yeah.
And what?
Versions
Fruit?
of milk.
Fruits, especially berries. Look at the health benefits. I've actually written a post on blueberries and other berries, but blueberries. Powerful stuff, like especially for your brain. Very good for you. So fruit and berries. Veggies get I've seen a lot of stuff. I'll actually just say it by name. Paul Saladino or whatever. I do not
Saladino.
I do not really, not my
one of those Italians.
Not my source of who. He doesn't say, like, he says some good stuff, but not definitely some stuff I'm like, dude, come on. They talk about like, oh, veggies, like they have these built-in mechanisms to not be eaten and it's toxic and all that. I actually watched Lane Norton like really dismantle this, because if you look at like these one little things they have and you cherry pick that, well, then if you apply that to even things like meat and other things, you can find single things in those that would make meat bad. You can do a lot of stuff. Meat intake would increase your IGF-1, which is insulin like growth factor. Well, if you have high IGF-1, there's certain cancers that will use that as like rocket fuel. But no one's sitting here saying avoid meat. That would be dumb. Don't do that. It's very healthy, but that's like if you want to cherry pick something. So It's crazy that I even have to say this, but veggies.
It makes the carnivore diet like impossible. So that's ignored. You know what I mean? So it's one of those examples of cherry picking what you like versus not versus avoiding
anything look bad. Lane Norton, again, to bring him up, did something really funny where like he was like, I'm going to do what they do. And was talking about how eating poop, like in cherry picking things about eating. It was so funny. But yeah, no, veggies are great. There's a lot of good nutrients you can get. I mean, they're not as like nutrient dense as say an egg or salmon or beef, because you need to eat a lot more, but they do have good nutrients. Veggies are a good part of your diet. Then what other than that? And then, for like good carb sources, obviously fruit, it's going to have some carbs. And don't be afraid of the sugar in fruit. It's unfound. As long as you're within your caloric limits, like you'll be fine. Like just look at how your body even processes those carbs from fruits, things like berries. They're not this boogeyman. So like, oh no, it has sugar. It's like, let's use some common sense here. But for your like bang for your buck carbs, I guess veggies will have some, those are trace amounts. You're not going to get like a ton of carbs from veggies.
Mostly fiber.
But now you start looking at things like potatoes. Potatoes are probably, I think they're the meta for a carb. They're highly satiating. They're actually, a boiled potato is the most satiating food. So it's going to leave you full on lower calories. Then it's the potassium, more potassium than a banana. Banana's the potassium food, right? No, potatoes. So potassium's good for like muscle pumps. And if you need potassium to keep blood pressure low, you need that balance to support healthy blood pressure. Potatoes are great. You can survive. I'm pretty sure you can survive on potatoes. Like there's a potato diet thing. There's like a famous person that followed a potato diet and lost a lot of weight. But potatoes are great. That's a S tier carb source. And then this is rice. Rice is not, you're not getting a ton of great nutrients from rice. It's not this power packed food, but it's your you should be getting a lot of your nutrients from your things that are giving your protein and your fats. So when it comes to rice, it's really good for fuel. Really good for fuel. It's good for digestion. Like I've not talked to anyone yet, and I've talked to thousands of people, especially now with this account and all that. I've never talked to anyone with digestive issues with rice. For a lot of people, I mean, what do you give a dog with stomach issues? You give them chicken and rice, because I don't know many people. There will be someone's listening to this, they might have an issue, but it's so rare. So rare. It would be the exception rather than the rule to have an issue digesting rice. So it's a good, clean carb source that's going to fuel your athletic endeavors. And then we can also, things like lentils, good, but in general, but if you're noticing a trend, these are whole foods, natural, good whole foods. That should be the bulk of your diet. But to come back to my point, I saw a video like 2 days ago, and it was basically Stan Efferding, who I like Stan Efferding a lot. I believe he's the vertical diet guy. Basically said exactly what I just said. But so I get a lot of people like, oh, you seem to be a disciple of him. I'm like, no. But it goes to show there's a lot of concepts in health that if you know what you're talking about, you'll arrive to the same conclusions as everyone else. So I think that's neat. You see that with muscle growth and stuff a lot. Like, you don't have to have the same mentor or the same coaches or whatever. And most people end up coming to these like very similar conclusions. So yeah, basically everything I covered, if that made up most of your diet, you would you feel pretty good. You'd be pretty healthy. Your blood work, everything should reflect as well. Like, you should be pretty healthy. Now I'll ask you, I think in a perfect world, you would eat 100% whole foods, and you do that, and that'd be great. However, I take an approach of 80-20, 90-10, because I'm a fat kid at heart. If I was to just eat these things all the time, I think I might go a little crazy. And I need a donut every now and then. There's a lot of people who'd be like, if you train your palate, you'll never eat these again. I'm guilty of even saying something kind of similar. Obviously, you know me, my thing is nuance. I'll provide nuance on this, but like, I have fixed my palate before. I have been eating this whole food diet, only eating whole foods and all that. My cravings for these things never go away. It's like Pandora's box. Once you've had it once, you know.
Yeah, no, I'm one of these weird cases where before actually the popularization of eating whole foods and eating really clean, I came from a household of, my mother, she kind of just naturally followed this because her mother, she came from like Italy, right? She basically came from, northern Italy, sort of in this mountainous region. And they really did just cook, right? And that was how they fed, and lots of, hosting lots of parties and stuff like this, where we'd be cooking lots of food and stuff like that. So I come from like a line of people who cook lots of meals, and how that kind of translated to my own mother was that we had lots of home cooked meals, and she was also very interested in this. And she also had this eye towards like eating clean from back in the 90s, and so I grew up in a house that never had soda, rarely had junk food. I think we had Doritos like a couple times in our house. And so my idea of, I know this is sort of a tangent, but I'm going somewhere with this. My idea of a snack, and you might laugh at this, was honestly tomatoes. Like, my idea of something that I craved or like would really enjoy would be a tomato, and especially like tomatoes from our yard when we would, we'd have a garden with tomatoes. I just go back there and like just pop them in my mouth. They're just so good. I would go to school and I would be like the guy during snack time to literally pop out like a big tomato, cut it with like a plastic knife and put some salt on it. And it actually was so off the beaten path that it became popular. So people started bringing in tomatoes and trying it. Yeah. So here's where I'm going with this. I think because of my upbringing, my palate is already sort of trained in this like base way, so that for me, I don't actually typically crave. I do have cravings. Trust me. I love burgers. I love pizza.
You're telling me? I spent a week with you. You're definitely better than I am. We'll put it that way.
Well, yeah.
And yours was necessity because you needed so many calories too. So.
I know. I would literally buy things I didn't even want, and I would just shove them in my mouth. Like that red, what was that? That like, what was it? Red velvet?
It was a red velvet 7-Eleven cake.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that like, I believe in training your palate, but I think it's way harder for people to train it after they're had an upbringing where it was like that, And also a big thing was that I grew up on lots of hearty soups, like homemade soups, like literally like put a chicken in a big bowl, vat of water and make your own broth, eat the chicken, and so anyway, I'm not flexing here, although I kind of am, but I do believe in training your palate. But again, I think after those developmental years, you're just locked in. You're locked in, and like you're gonna crave those things, and you can do it to your point. And you could do it. You could be okay if you just do like the 80-20 rule. Like I really like that. So like 80% of the time, you have those whole food. You cook your own meals. You have those whole foods. And you could cook them well so that they're actually enjoyable. But like, yeah, then you allow yourself the occasional donut or whatever. So
two things.
Yeah.
One, I like that you said that, and I like how you've mentioned that these habits. Well, no, first thing, you just apologized about going on a tangent to Mr. Tangent, which is hilarious. I should just be constantly apologizing.
You're just a permanent tangent.
But the other point is it's cool to see that you ended up holding those habits and everything into your adult years and all that, because that's what we're doing with my son. And everyone's like, oh, the second he tries anything, you're screwed. But I've talked to more people that did. And then it wasn't that they were forced, but it's just how they ate at home. And it was very healthy, and it was very healthy all the time. And then as adults, they still eat very healthy because that's what they like and enjoy. So that's what we're doing with our son. I get so much flack for that. They're like, you need to let him live, blah, blah. I'm like, he's one. He turns one.
But the thing is, he was reaching when you had him over here. He was actually like reaching for the salmon and the blueberries too. Like he was like reaching for these things, and like because they would be like out of his like they would be on the plate in front of him, and he's just like grabbing at them. You know, he like clearly wanted to eat it. So it's like, yeah, his palate's probably well adjusted to healthy foods.
Crazy. 3 weeks, he's one. Don't know where that time went, but yeah, we're and you've seen him. He's a very healthy kid. His head size is in the 99th percentile, which is a pretty good, decent indicator for IQ. Very healthy weight. Like we make the joke, he's a jack baby. It's funny. He's actually like a jacked baby. Like I think some genetics play into this, but the diet too. But that also, my upbringing was so different. Couldn't have been any more different. Granted, we would eat meals together and all that. We had like the good, nuclear family until that ended when I was like 14. I'm not going to talk about my traumas here, but we would eat, good steak, baked potato and all that. But we had Pop-Tarts, the flavor ices, those icy pops. Oh my gosh. Red, white, and blue pops, sodas out the galore. Because I was telling you, like my strange addiction is when it fits in my calories, instead of using like cyclic dextrin or whatever for a workout, I will actually use, like I will go and grab a Mountain Dew Code Red because that is like an addiction from my childhood. And so we had a ton of that. We just had access to tons of junk food. And I naturally ate really good on my own. Like my favorite thing growing up were like chicken wraps. Like loved those. I would just chicken, some cheese, shredded lettuce with some like tacos. Loved it. But my brother,
nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
He ended up like he had to break these habits. So I got fortunate there, but like, no, I've seen what happens. And that's probably, I actually say that's why I have ADHD, is all the processed everything. I think as an adult, the effects start to really diminish. Like you're kind of you're developed. But during my developmental years, I was just pounding sodas with Red 40 and all this stuff. So I'm like, thanks, Mom. You gave me ADHD. Now, let me preface, she's a fantastic mother. But I'm like, thanks, Mom. And that's where I guess to get into like the 80-20, I do think if you go into a sustained deficit, especially if you do something like bodybuilding or whatever, you'll kind of be forced into like 90-10 or even like 99-1. There will be periods where it just makes more sense because whole food's more satiating. You can get more food out of your day. It's less caloric dense than junk. I think 80-20 is good for flexibility. Where I'm remiss to say a little bit is people going too hard on junk and all that. Like you want to focus on more whole foods. And like I said, in a perfect world, it's built in flexibility, but like you want to eat as good as you can, but do what's realistic. So I'm not really suggesting you should eat a bunch of junk food and like, you have 20% has to be junk food. No, just to be realistic because to stick with a diet and a diet to be successful, you need to adhere to it. You need to be consistent. It needs to be something you enjoy. So if you do need that little bit, if up to 20%, now you don't want most of it being junk. And as you start dieting, especially in a deficit, you will learn that 500 calories from chicken and rice versus 500 calories from Pop-Tart, way different. You're going to be starving after the Pop-Tart in a deficit. You're going to be hungry still. After the rice, you'll get some satiation. So I guess I didn't want this to turn into a basic diet 101 thing. So we've spent 45 minutes. This is going to end up being a longer one. So,
you brought up adherence, and I recently actually came across something. I've been reading a little bit about like motivation and people who struggle, especially with diet, because diet's a tough one. Like training is relatively easy for the most part. I mean, not for everybody.
More addictive too.
It's definitely more addictive. It's a once a day thing at it's like
it's
like 4 to 5 times. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like 4 to 5 times a week.
Every other, sorry, I was talking to everybody. And it can be an every other day thing.
Exactly. It could be every other day thing. It's only 2 hours out of your day. You do it and you get it in. It's like you're good. There's no more that you need to do. But with diet, it's like this 24-hour constant thing. It's like a lifestyle that you need to adopt. And that's a lot harder. You tell anybody to adopt any new habit that is 24/7 with that actually includes like I don't know if this is a real thing, but like pleasure receptors, like, because you eat something that's like pleasurable. It's like people like, it's like, I mean, I love food, I get it. So, but anyway, so I've been looking into this a bit to try to help people with this, and I came across what's called the Six Construct model of adherence. And I don't know, do you want to go through it real quick? It's just it's 6 little things, and I just think there's some value to it. I think there's some. Yeah. It might be good to like illuminate sort of these concepts so people can have a good idea. Yeah,
please. So I can send off this tweet. I'm I'm really good at multitasking. So I'll sit here on the podcast and be on my phone doing this. And then you would think I'm about to be like, oh, what'd you say? And then I'll just jump right back in. That is, thanks mom for the red 40. Thanks for the ADHD. Because I'm good at this. I got something out of it. It's funny. She listens to this. I love you, mom. I'm joking. Kinda. You're a great mom, but you could have been better with my food. We're gonna lose half of our viewers. My mom's done. We have your mom still.
Oh no. I actually like said a lot of nice things about my mom, so she's sticking around. She introduced me to tomatoes. But anyway, so there's these 6 constructs, and the idea behind this really is to break down, because I think people think of like motivation as just like the only thing. It's like there's how do you stay motivated and everything like that. It's like that's kind of a daunting thing, because motivation, as we know, is like fleeting. It can come, it can go. And so it's better to break down sort of like this, what has been called the 6 construct model. And it starts basically like this. Like if you think of the first thing of the first construct is inspiration. And that's like a very fleeting thing, right? Like you go on Instagram, you see someone with like some sick abs and you're just like instantly like, I want that. That's inspiration. That's like incredibly fleeting. It could be over within a couple hours. But it's the thing that it's that like jump start. It's that like, it's that thing that just inspires you to like want to change. And it might not be enough to actually get you to do anything, but that's where the next construct comes in, which is actually motivation. It's like, you can think of motivation as slightly more of a more long-lasting type of goal-oriented stance towards your goals. It might get you to actually like go to the gym one day or to try to eat a little bit healthier for like maybe a week or two. But that's where motivation, it wanes. And so these the next construct is actually called intention, which is, basically it's a more of a commitment you develop. It's not quite, motivation is still kind of fleeting. It's this thing that can come and go based on moods and based on, what you're consuming and who you're talking to. But intentionality, it's sort of like motivation plus a plan, right? So you might actually start adhering to your plan. You might really, you're taking it serious enough now that you're following a plan. You're getting into a bit of a groove. And then through that comes the next construct, which is discipline, which is basically, I mean, we kind of understand what discipline is. It's something that like it's less, it becomes less about the feeling like doing it and more like you've made this dedication to yourself and you've done it long enough now that the dedication's more the point. You're dedicated now, like you're in. And if you miss a day for whatever reason, the dedication side of you is going to keep you going. It's like a motor. The next construct is habit. This is an even more powerful kind of force because it's something that's completely unthinking. It's something that like you almost don't even know that, like, it's like there's not a question that you're going to eat healthy, you're going to go to the gym. It's like there's not a choice. It's just sort of you develop the habit. And then finally, the last construct, this is, and by the way, just to give you an idea, an overview of where I'm going with this, is that these things build into one another. And why it's important and to even consider this is because you want to grow into these next stages. So if you've experienced inspiration, you can kind of count on the next stage being more motivated. And then if you develop a plan and you get more intentional about it, you now know that you're building up to this, through these 6 stages, these 6 constructs, and the final construct being passion, which is that you're now so enthusiastic about your goals. It's something that's sort of like you're immersed in so much and you love it that you no longer really need motivation because now you're enthusiastically tackling your diet. You're enthusiastically tracking your macros every day because the goal state and the lifestyle becomes this thing that you love. And why it's important to have this like last construct be passion is because it's a good goal to get to have. If you move through these constructs and you get to the point where you're now passionate about it, it's a wonderful goal state because it just sort of, it carries you. So aim for that. And I think that's a good way of approaching, adherence, because adherence is really what we're after, not so much motivation. People get lost in the idea that they need to be constantly motivated. You want to aim for adherence. You want to adhere to your goals. And I think knowing these constructs is a way to sort of plot out how this is going to go over time. And you can actually look forward to something like developing a passion, because for a lot of people, it's such a chore, So knowing that it can become a passion of yours is probably a good motivator in and of itself. So,
and what's that called? The 6 what?
6 constructs of adherence.
Cool. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. It's, once you get finding out whatever way you can to start getting results is probably the most important thing. As long as it's healthy and sustainable, of course. Like a crash diet, you can get results quick, but you're not building any good habits, any good foundations, or anything like that. So maybe it works for a slight few people, but it'll end up biting you in the ass. So finding a good sustainable way with good habits that then get you progress as fast as you can, that's huge. Results. I'll do a lot of stuff I don't like if I get good results from it. Like, I don't think most people just love their jobs, but that first and 15th paycheck, or however you get paid, whenever you get paid, that's when it's like, oh, okay, all right, this is worth it. Hopefully. I hope you all have good jobs. I hope you all enjoy your job.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a useful model for anything, not just diet. Like even like for what I'm doing right now, like, you and I with the podcast and putting out content and stuff like that. If you're not organized and you don't have like intention, meaning like a plan, then the motivation will come and go and you'll have bad days and good days. And it's like, that's an organized, it's almost like just becoming organized at that stage. And then discipline comes from that, and from there habit, and then passion.
It's so funny, not getting into our lives and all that, but this is such a big theme because we're both human. We both have our strengths and weaknesses and our own struggles.
Despite our physiques.
Yeah, despite our physiques. Yeah, no, we're human. We have big struggles, and that's been a big thing for me and you on a business level too, to just take things to a level we want to get, is being like, okay, we really need to start looking at what we're doing and blah, blah. And then like this big thing is like, finding this sustainable, organized approach that's going to get us the results we're after. We can put up with a lot of stuff as long as the results are coming in. And so, yeah, it's like, the parables for this, or the parallels for this, parables. What am I thinking? The parallels for this are, they're very universal. So we've talked now. This will be a little bit longer of an episode, I guess. Not a bad thing. I'm feeling good. You feeling good?
Yeah.
Feeling good, man.
Feeling good because my diet is locked in.
That's kind of segues us into what I want to talk about next, which is kind of getting into more advanced into, we really just went over the basics. And while sure the basics are cool, a lot of you that have read us and familiar with us, this stuff. But yeah, big thing is, baby crying in the background. Cool. I can pay him for this episode because he's an employee and then I don't get taxed. What? So I'm in a competition prep and my diet is very dialed in, and because my calories are lower, I don't really have room. I can't eat Jersey Mike's every day anymore, which hurts, but it's very clean. And yeah, I always realize this when I go into a deficit and I get really strict and I'm like, why do I ever eat different from this ever? Like, I feel so good. I have so much energy. We'll talk in 8 weeks and I'll be like, I feel like I'm dying. I have people will be doing these podcasts. People hear my voice and I'll go from this chipper and all this to being like, yeah, dude. So, yeah, diet, man. But I always feel so much better. And I even let some flexibility, kind of to tie into the last point is the other day I had some calories left over. I don't know why I was down a meal. I think I had my first meal later than I normally do. And I got to eat a big bowl of Apple Jacks because I realized I haven't had Apple Jacks in like 10 years. And it was amazing. But I was the second I was done, 10 minutes later, I was like, I'm still hungry. It was at the end of the day and all that. So it was fine. But it's kind of like, that's, I guess, 2 points is, yeah, you can still enjoy some stuff, but also like, yeah, you might not enjoy it as much as you thought you would. So getting into, and this is actually a written post I'm doing. I've wanted this post to go out for like a month. People aren't familiar. My writing style is like, I'm one of those like chaotic creatives. I got to be like in the right state and all this. Writing is not easy for me. That's why I like doing these podcasts. Writing for me is like taxing. I can't just force myself to write, which sucks. But so I've got this post hopefully going out in the next couple of days, but more of these advanced fat loss. It's writing as in like you are committed and you'll do whatever it takes to get the best results, and kind of how I would do that. So like kind of leading into this, not like as in depth, but because that's going to be more cardio steps, some other stuff, but setting up our diets. I am a really big fan when it comes to both muscle growth and fat loss, getting the most from the least, because we'll go at fat loss first and then go into muscle growth. If I'm going to cut, you can safely typically go into like 1,000 calorie deficit. So my maintenance is we did it the other day, 30 to 3,300 calories. And I could do 2,200, 2,300, but I'm going to be doing this for 16 weeks total. So do I want to start with the max, as far in a deficit as I could go? No, that doesn't make sense, because one, you start running into the risk of poor performance, which will lead to muscle loss. If not just being in the fact your deficit is so big that you will use muscle for energy, not just fat. You'll use stored muscle. So that's not good. Then you want to have options. So start lighter in a deficit. Start, 300 to 500, maybe push, maybe 600 if you want to. 300 to 500 calories. That's why kind of 500 calories. It's a pound, because a pound of fat is roughly 3,500 calories. So if you're in a 500 calorie deficit a day, that ends up being around 3,500 calories, which is a pound of fat. And it's the math on this is kind of satisfying because that ends up being like right around the rate that is a really good rate to lose fat. And then it ends up perfect. It's a pound per week. So it's kind of funny how that works out, but that's roughly where I'd start because one, you don't want to exhaust all those options, like that tool, because you can lose fat through intake, lowering your intake, but also by increasing expenditure. So I'd rather start lower or with a smaller deficit, 300, 500 calorie deficit. Then once I get to a point where, okay, I need to lower this more to continue fat loss because I now weigh less. So my base metabolic rate and all that's lower. So you just naturally have to start lowering your calories. Well, maybe instead of lowering my calories again, maybe I go with adding, I like to go on walks and stuff. Maybe I add 2,500 steps to my day. Another option is maybe I just add some cardio in. Maybe I add, 20 minutes of cardio a few days a week. You have those options where if you take your calories down all the way to what's safe that you could do, you're forced now to do cardio, increase steps and all that. When even then I could be like, I'm not really feeling like doing more cardio or anything. So I'll just lower another, couple hundred calories. I've only lowered it in total like 700, 800 calories. So I like to approach it that way and kind of milk each little change that I can get for the most progress. Now, if I was only going to cut for like, a 4-week cut or 8-week cut, now, okay, maybe I do go a little bit more aggressive because I'm going to be in and out of the deficit pretty fast. That would be a time where it's like, okay, I could see, 700, 800,000 max calorie deficit. But the big part is also the adherence. If you go into these big deficits, you're going to get hungry, way hungrier than you would have on just a 500 calorie deficit. So are you going to be able to power through that? Or are you going to, sure, you might on paper be losing fat at a quicker rate, but 2-3 days a week, you completely screw up your diet and you binge eat. You give into cravings. So are you actually going to lose fat faster than you would have at 500 calories a day where you can actually, it never happens or it only happens once a week? I mean, it's an obvious answer. It's a question of accounting that yes, the person that is more consistent is going to be able to lose more fat. But I'm curious on your take on this because
aim at sustainability. Yeah, I think sustainability leads to consistency, which leads to predictable changes, which I think is, I think it's just a better overall. And you don't really run the risk of having too much like muscle loss in the process. And I actually wanted to add that, I'm curious what you think of this, but I like to make these changes because you did mention that you like to make these changes sort of in steps where where like for example, the first thing you do would be to lower calories to a certain level, and then if you want to increase the rate of loss, you'll add in 2,500 steps, for example, or add in some cardio. But I want to put a point on the fact of doing this in stages, and so that way you can actually see the benefits of each one of these changes as they happen, and that way you can sort of like better judge what's working and if it is working at all or if it's not, or what changes you might need to make. So yeah, making these changes in stages, I think, is probably a smart point.
Yeah, that's it's just the critical thinking and common sense and applying context and everything to what you're going to do, which is a very, very important concept of fitness to me because a lot of people miss that. And I would say that's what makes a good fitness coach and a good fitness educator versus, what's a great fitness coach versus a good one is someone that can completely understand these contexts and these nuances. So going into a bulk here, so we can now look at Muscle takes, rough ballpark numbers, as low as 100 to 300 extra calories in a surplus to grow. So why I don't necessarily suggest why not just a 100 calorie surplus or a 200 calorie surplus? Because unless you're super standardized and perfect, like you are going to move exactly 10,000 steps every day and life's never going to happen or whatever, you're not always going to burn, 3,200 calories every single day. So if you burned now 3,500 calories, but you're only eating 3,400 calories to try to grow, well, then you weren't in a surplus for that day. So I like to give a little bit of margin of error on that. Just a little bit. It doesn't matter as much with cutting, as long as it only becomes an issue if you're factoring for activity and then you don't do activity. So typically I see a bigger issue with being overactive. So I like to give a little bit of margin of error. So if you're pretty standardized and you're pretty good at this, I like to say 300 minimum, but like 300 to 500, the same kind of guidance too. 300 to 500 calories in a surplus. So if your estimated expenditure is 3,200 a day, call it 35 to 3,700 calories. And even if you do have days where you do mess this up and you might burn more or whatever, it'll average out long enough over time. One day is not enough to throw off our progress. Like in a deficit, you can start running into issues that if you're in a 500 calorie deficit, then you decide to eat 4,000 extra calories on Sunday. Yeah, okay, now you might run into some issues. Which actually, before I get into bulking, that's a rabbit hole I want to go down. We were talking about it, and I'm always like, it's hard to write or tweet about. It can be taken out of context. You actually shouldn't beat up yourself too bad. If you do one day, and it doesn't happen often, go like super over calories, because even though the total deficit and all that is what matters. Ooh, son is mad. I hear him yelling. But even if you are going over on one day, even if you ate 3,500 calories over maintenance that day, to say you put on a pound of fat that day, it's not going to happen. It's just not, that's not the rate you're going to store it. You're going to just burn through some through digestion. You're naturally going to increase your energy expenditure through, you have more energy, you ate more food. So that's going to kind of offset a little bit. Plus just the rate at which you store those calories, like it gets thrown off a little bit. So it's not something I actually beat yourself up over. It's not a good habit to have, but that's something I would like. We were talking about the other day. You're definitely losing fat the day you're in the deficits. And I don't think you'll completely reverse that with one day, but
yeah, no.
Moving on to bulking. Yeah. I still like to keep it lighter, and it's not as cut and dry. There are still mechanisms of muscle growth that can happen absence of a surplus. So, and especially newer trainees, it's not a huge make or break thing. You could get away with, eating at maintenance and probably growing and losing fat at the same time. So training status plays into this a little bit. So it's just, I don't see a big reason, because the big reason is, in a perfect world, what you do is you cut to, let's just call it 10% body fat to be simple. Then, okay, cool. You cut, now you want to bulk. I don't think you should really ever go over 15, 16, 18% body fat at an absolute maximum, because now you're going to start running into, one, you're not going to look good. You're going to be chunky, no abs, anything. Two, you can start getting insulin resistance, which is not good. Then you can start, so the enzyme that converts testosterone to estrogen, it's called aromatase. It lives in fatty tissue. So once you start adding more and more and more body fat, and you start pushing beyond 18%, you will start to increase this conversion of testosterone to estrogen, which is obviously no bueno. So that's why you want to go slower, is because you're going to put on some fat regardless in a surplus. It's not all going to be muscle growth. I wish it was. That'd make life a lot easier. So and then you need to be in a surplus for a good amount of time to put on a good amount of muscle, especially as you get more advanced. Like a few pounds of muscle a year, if you're advanced, it's amazing. That's just a crazy, awesome year. So you want to give yourself, enough time, 4, 5, 6 months to be able to be in the surplus without getting over these, 15, 16% body fat. So that's why you want to go slower. You want to be doing enough that you're doing what it takes to grow, but not so much that you have to cut that short. And so it's always good to keep that stuff in mind, because I will tell you right now, what I see more than anything is a dude cuts. One, he's just hungry because he just got done cutting, right? And then you see just the diet goes to shit, and they start eating everything. And they are planning they're going to bulk for 4 months, 16 weeks. Next thing you know, it's been 6 weeks, and they went from 10% body fat to 14. Like, I've seen even people worse. They've gone, 10% body fat to like 16% body fat in less than 2 months. And now it's kind of like, well, fuck. I don't think I should keep doing this.
Yeah.
Bulking's honestly harder than cutting in a lot of aspects.
I find I thought it was harder for sure.
Yeah,
it was definitely, yeah.
I don't have that issue because I can eat. But that's why it's also harder for me. It's way easier for me to just eat lower calories, hit my numbers. Cool. Maybe I'm hungry. I can fight through. I got good willpower to fight through that. But if I let myself just eat and I'm not having a good plan, I'm not tracking, and I'm just trying to be like, we'll call it intuitive, and like, oh, that should be enough calories, bro, I will naturally start eating 5,000-6,000 calories a day. No issue at all. So for me, I have to track and be as diligent on a bulk as I do with a cut. The only difference is now I get a little bit more flexibility, and I get some more good food, and I just get more food in general. So that's a big piece. So, I mean, outside of this, I guess we can start going into, before we wrap this up, I know something the audience doesn't know. He doesn't want me to say it, though. He doesn't want me to say it.
No.
Binaural beats is what you're listening to on Spotify. That's very interesting. But
am I listening to that?
It says you are. But
oh yeah, there you go.
People like to worry about things like meal timing. And like, oh yeah, you got to eat every 2 hours, blah, blah, blah. Don't get me wrong. More feedings, like good, doses of protein and all that. If you're getting into muscle protein synthesis and all that, like,
I think it's good to just have. Sorry to cut in, but I just think it's good to have. What's it called? Like, I know that you can basically, like, it's a lot of studies came out and everything like that, which says like you could have like all your protein in like one meal. I kind of very like, they say that, but I think still it's just in your best benefit to spread it out as much as possible, so that you kind of, just so you have protein in your system sort of all the time. I that's just a personal thing. I don't base this off of anything in the literature or anything like that. But I think it's probably just best. Plus, it's easier to do. It's easier to maintain. Like forcing a ton of protein in your system like all at once. It's like you try doing that a couple times and see how long that lasts. I mean, that's going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, even though the literature showed that like you can have more. Your body will use what it gives you, regardless of dose. It still wasn't designed in a perfect way that I would like to see, like what's 50 versus 100 grams of protein look like. But anyway, for especially like putting on size, I would say 4 to 6 meals, because that's 4 times you're going to be, peaking muscle protein synthesis 4 to 6 times, and you're going to spread those out, every, 3 to 4, 5 hours. Not something to like set timers on and really worry about unless you're just trying to win Mr. Olympia and do everything you can. It matters less when you're cutting. Like that's where I could say you could get away with, eating 2 meals a day. You can even do the 1 meal a day thing and all that. Probably be okay, but it gets harder with the calories you need and everything for muscle growth. It's easier to just spread it. I do think there is a little bit of a net benefit from having more meals during the day, but in general, just take your protein and your calories, divide it by 4 or 6, eat 4 to 6 meals. 3 would be for like muscle growth. 3 would be the least I would prescribe if you're trying to really get the most you can. Once you get down to 2, 1 meals a day, I do think you are going to be losing out on a little bit of benefit. Not to say you won't grow, but you will be losing out on a little bit, because at the end of the day, total protein and total calories for the day, that's king. That's what really, really matters. Cutting doesn't matter as much, but yeah, 3 would be my minimum if I was trying to really max. But very, very minimum, but I think 4 to 6. And there's a reason why, like, if you look at most bodybuilders, it's 6 meals a day. It kind of follows these general lines of thought. But it's not something to really, not really something to really worry about too much. It says that your recording just did something weird.
Yeah. I think my quality of audio probably just changed. I think for some reason my headphones disconnected.
Oh, you sound fine, but I do yeah. I mean, when it comes to meal timing, that it gets a huge, people talk about it a lot. I just don't think, again, context, most people listening to this, it's not something to worry about huge. Now, if you're trying to be just this crazy good competitive bodybuilder, yeah, now it matters a little bit more. But that doesn't really, beyond that, like what we just said, it doesn't really get too crazy.
I think one of the most important things with meal timing is outside of spreading out your meals, it's just prioritizing the right kinds of meals around your training. So you're probably gonna want to avoid fatty foods around the training window in the pre-training meal and your post-training meal. For digestive reasons, I mean, I think you'll just feel kind of zapped in the gym.
That's an issue. If I have too much food on my stomach, yeah, I'll get no pump. Like it'll be bad. So I just really, it's overrated to try to get a ton of carbs post workout, because it's not actually you don't really deplete enough glycogen to need to replace it at this rapid rate and all that. But getting that insulin in and everything, that now that's where we're talking about, okay, that has some benefit, shuttle the nutrients and all that. So that's why, yeah, I try to base most of my carbs around my workout, but in general, I spread them out pretty even, just erring on a little bit more pre and post workout. But yeah, it's not something to like stress about. And it's really all about doing what is then going to be you feel the best and it just works with you. So, I mean, that really covers most of it. The one thing that I like to hit on is micronutrients. It's like you want to be cognizant of this. You want to make sure if you're eating mostly whole foods and you're getting, the beef, the fish, the eggs, and all the berries and all that, you're probably going to get your micronutrients and all that. But it is something to be cognizant of, that you're not just eating, if someone just ate chicken, rice, and broccoli, it is like the bro diet. But if you look at the nutrients of that, you're going to be missing some stuff, and you're not going to get like any fat, which is not going to be good for you at all. So that's something to be cognizant of, but that's a rabbit hole. You could go down a huge rabbit hole on this. So, but if you're sticking with mostly whole foods, you're going to be good for the most part. Now, we live in a very different world than we used to live in. Our soil has less nutrients, our food has less nutrients and all that. So there can be times where supplementation is smart. I'm big on magnesium. I have felt what it feels like when I don't take any, and I felt what it feels like when I do take magnesium, and I take magnesium. That's one little key note here on like micronutrients. Multivitamins is a point of contention that I struggle with. I think most multivitamins suck, but I don't think multivitamins are bad. I think they can be useful. I think they have their place. But if I really knew for my diet I wasn't getting nutrients like at all, like for whatever reason, like fix your diet. But if you're not, I can see a multivitamin. There's just aspects of a multivitamin that it's kind of like, do you really need this? Or is everything in this good for you? So I wouldn't feel bad though suggesting one, but I'm not necessarily suggesting one, but like I wouldn't feel like I was causing any harm. And I feel like there could be some benefit to suggest one, but it's not something that I'm going to like really harp on, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more on individual supplementation for micros, kind of having an idea. And especially if you get blood work, you can have a really good idea. But that's just, I would be remiss to not talk about that here.
Yeah.
And then
I think it's a good topic.
I mean, we could go down a lot of rabbit holes, but I think for this episode, we've pretty much got everything. Really, the last point that I would really like to hit on would be electrolytes. And that's really it. And that is that it's not just crucial for performance in the gym, it's crucial to avoid injury in the gym, and it's crucial for health, blood pressure, cellular, like your water levels, your kidneys, everything. And a lot of people fearmonger salt. I'm going to say right now, most athletes eating mostly whole food diets probably aren't getting enough salt. Salt becomes an issue, as I was saying earlier, when potassium is lacking. But if you're getting good potassium, salt is like a PED. Like salt is great. Pumps, muscle contractions, everything. Salt is huge. But you need to make sure you're covered on this, because the last thing you want to do is be completely out of whack with electrolytes. Now you can run into cardiovascular issues. Your performance in the gym can tank, and you can run into blood pressure and all that. So something to leave you with is really look at your potassium intake. Like really look at that. Most people are pretty low on potassium intake. And that's what's causing issues with sodium, is because of this balance. So, yeah.
I always have the best. I always have the best pumps with after I eat something salty.
Yeah, I feel bad. I did too much talking this time.
No, you're really good. Actually, it's one of the things that you're definitely a specialist in. I feel like you're pretty solid in this stuff. I just like to hear you kind of give your take on all this stuff. It's really great.
Yeah, it's one of those things that we can go super far down a ton of rabbit hole. I mean, there's different things we can talk about. It's kind of like there is more things we can talk about, but like there's not really much more we can talk about.
Save for another episode.
Because we could really get into like optimizing diet and stuff like that. But I mean, even in general, everything I just said is more or less like that is what I worry about 90% of the time, maybe even more. 99% of the time, like it's this, and then it starts getting into considerations like, okay, like how's my saturated fat intake, which is a very controversial topic right now. I try actually not to do overload saturated fat. And it's not that I truly believe it could be causing issues, but there has been previous data and enough stuff to show that it could potentially for certain people. And so I try to be more safe with that, but we get into stuff like that. Fiber is actually like a point of like contention too, where there's some people being like, you don't want fiber. Fiber is bad. Why would you want fiber? And then the other side being like, no, you're dumb. You need fiber. Like, are you trying to get colon cancer? Like, so there's a lot we can go into, but I'm comfortable where we are.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. What are we going to talk about next time? I think we should talk about the fitness industry.
Yeah, I think it's a good topic. A lot to say there.
Let's get away from technicals, and we should do one on
our musings on the state of things.
Yeah, I think
Natty
the
or not,
fitness industry. I think the fitness industry has come a long way, but every time I think it's come a long way, it doesn't, and I see it's a pendulum. Like I'm not going to act like this OG that's been doing this for 30, 40 years, and I am like a godfather of this. No, I've been technically doing this as a fitness professional, meaning I'm getting paid for fitness advice for almost 10 years, which is scary to think about because when I started, don't get me wrong, I knew more than, well, that's actually kind of the point of the conversation we can get into. Because yeah, I might not have known, I didn't know anything compared to what I know now, but I was a useful idiot. But that's another point to make on like who is in the industry now and all that. So that'll be a fun talk. Yep.
Yeah.
So cool.
Looking forward to it.
Hopefully, yeah, this time, like, yeah, I feel bad this time. I'm like, dude, I said a lot of words, but
cool. A lot like our phone calls.
Hey, you talk just as much as I do on the phone, so don't even, girlfriend.
All right. Well, sounds good. Looking forward to the next one.
Leeroy